Road. Okay, here. Never mind. That should be fine. Oh, okay. I forgot one thing. I have to actually get you in here. There you are. And let's go. Nope. Malfunction again. New studio, new buttons, new everything. Try that one more time. What's going on, everybody? Dan here, welcoming you to another episode of Process Potables. And if you're tuning in, then you're already probably familiar with recurring guest Marty Teller joining us yet again, as this is, one of several times in the season where this is peak Marty time. The trade deadline is just about wrapped up. Still some buyout stuff, I'm sure, is going to happen, and we'll get to that. But Marty, Sixers get George Hill. Not a whole lot else happens. They don't give up anything that really should have much impact, especially this season, depending on how you really feel about Tony Bradley, I guess. But, before we really dive into it, we're going to talk about moves all over the NBA and things like that. Just your initial reaction. Talk to me about how you felt at like 3:30 today when you're kind of at that point where teams could still be on the phone and it's technically not over, but you're pretty sure everything that's going to happen. And, obviously we now know, but even then I think we were pretty sure that there was nothing super significant happening with the Sixers, and mainly that all revolved around Kyle Lowry and him ending up staying put in Toronto, which, based on everyone I talked to last night and the feeling I was getting for the last week or so, I think is a very big surprise to a lot of people.
Yeah, I tweeted, and I feel like I've jumped the shark. I've been on a couple of couple other podcasts. Obviously, you're the OG here, but
Listen, if you,
I
like,
was
I like Trill, and you and Trill do a great job, so I'm not jealous. I'm not mad. Let's kind of keep it, me and Trill. I think we've got dibs at this point. I'm willing to
okay.
share, but not
You got
too
the
much.
monopoly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been back and forth on Lowry, and it's not really about Lowry, but just about kind of what it took to get him, and how much I think Danny Green matters to this current makeup, and kind of why this team works. And I went back and forth, and even into like today, and I had kind of come to terms with like, okay, this is gonna happen. And then I was thinking, okay, you know what? I mean, at the end of the day, Lowry is a significant upgrade, over Green, just player to player. And then it didn't seem like it was going to happen. And then the George Hill trade happens. And in my mind, I thought it was a shrewd move, in the sense that it kind of put the pressure back on Toronto. Like, hey, we already have a point guard now, so like we don't have to get desperate. And so then I thought for a little while he was going to go to Miami. And then as it started getting like 245, 250, honestly, in my gut, I was like, we got Lowry. We got him, because they have to move him. They're going to lose him for nothing this summer, most likely. And I just, in my head, I was like, oh my gosh, like I was just waiting for that tweet at, like you said, 3 o'clock, 3:05, 3:15. And then all of a sudden Woj says like they're not moving him. And I was actually stunned that it didn't end up happening. So it was a roller coaster. Like I kind of hit like that exhaustion like peak, after like you've been through a traumatic event. I had that this afternoon
Yeah,
where I was like,
you were tweeting through it a little bit.
I was a little bit. I was trying to do my best to keep it together. And now like I'm kind of, jacked up. I have a little coffee going. Sixers in bed tonight.
Late night
Um,
Sixers, baby. Let's
yeah,
go.
talking to you. So, um, overall, like I don't know, like I'm not a big like let's grade the draft or anything like that. But if you're kind of putting a grade on it, what would you say for the Sixers specifically, like the George Hill move? What kind of grade would you give that today?
So, to try and be consistent with everything I'd either written and set up to this deadline, my gut feeling was that they weren't getting Kyle Lowry, and the two biggest things that I like combination of expected and wanted was a ball handler for the second unit to let Shake Milton focus more on being a shooting guard, and some version of a backup four or a 4-5 combo, like a stretch big, something like that. And when I was talking last night with guys like Rob Manoff and Bobby Dubs, who was over here talking to me, and we did our roundtable with a couple other guys, I think I really came into agreement. I think Rob really stressed the point that like the guard position was way more important than that stretch 4 or 5 kind of thing, because of the fact that I feel, I mean, I've felt good about Dwight Howard since the beginning of the season. I loved that, so I have no issue with Dwight being the backup to Embiid. And when you talk about Mike Scott, you really don't have to play him if you don't want to. And I think if you play him in spurts, it's fine. We've seen him knock down big shots, like in very small stretches. He could definitely still be a body, but you also could get away between just Tobias and Ben, not really needing like a backup quote unquote power forward, so to speak. So the guard thing was such a bigger deal, and George Hill was really high on my list. Like, would have loved Lowry, was a big fan of getting Lonzo here. I think probably after Lowry and Lonzo, as far as somebody who can actually initiate an offense, like George Hill's the next one, because Fournier's not that guy. He's, a shooting guard and a scorer. He's better than George Hill, but he's not a backup point guard. He's a scorer. So as far as that role, I mean, I think George Hill is probably like the third best option, and I wouldn't have been upset with any of them. So we got one. So it's hard to be that mad. My initial reaction to the actual deal, which ended up being what, Tony Bradley, Poirier, Ferguson, and 2 second-round picks. I think they're 25, 26.
Three. Well, it was actually 4 second-round picks, is what officially is. So
Oh, Jesus.
it's the 2 late ones that you just mentioned. It's our pick our second round pick this year, not the Knicks pick. There was some confusion about that. And then there's like a fake second that we own from Miami. It's like 31 through 55 protected in
Okay.
2024.
Sure.
So
That's
I
not
mean,
real.
technically it's four. Yeah. So yeah. Go ahead. Anyway.
So my initial reaction was that was a bit of an overpay, and not in the sense that I valued any of those things or even the sum of those things more than George Hill. It just seemed like a lot for one guy that I think they wanted to move anyway. Like obviously the difference with Kyle Lowry is like Toronto, it made sense to move him. You could have considered it a favor to him to move him to give him a shot, but I don't think they ultimately wanted to that bad, and they proved it by holding on to him and staying pat. So I think that's a real thing. Like George Hill was getting dealt, so I mean I don't know. I guess if that's what it took to make sure he didn't go somewhere else, that's fine. I think as long as he, I know this isn't like a fair way to evaluate anything, but as long as he does like the average of what I would expect him to do, I'll sleep well with that deal. But my initial thought was just that seems like a bit much for one guy. Like I thought that same deal could have maybe got you like Ellington and Wright from Detroit. Like I thought that was enough to get two guys. And while I think George Hill is more valuable than either of them, I don't know that he's more valuable than both, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think first off, the fact that not getting Lowry stinks, but the fact that he's staying in Toronto is like the Sixers' second best case scenario. Like that's for him not to end up in Miami. Not that I don't see Miami as a huge threat, but I mean I think they're going to be a tougher out than people maybe give them credit for now that they're starting to get healthy. So him staying in Toronto, I think, is a win if it's not here. I do think so. I give it a B, the trade itself, because I would have rather a couple things. Either use Scott over Bradley, because to me Bradley actually has value. I've been really impressed. I was excited for him from kind of the jump. I thought I had slowly kind of gone out on Zaire, and I thought from things I had read about Bradley there were some real promising signs, and he kind of proved it, I think, over the last 2 weeks. So I would rather
Absolutely.
have had I would rather have had him for the next 2 months, even if he didn't play at all once Embiid came back. I still would rather have that safety net and have used Mike Scott in that deal. So, like, if they would have used Mike Scott and then the same second rounders, I would have given it an A. Or if they would have ended up having only to use 2 versus 3 second rounders, I would have given it an A. Or if we would have gotten Muscala back with what we gave up, I would have given it an A. And I do think, and I was kind of tweeting about this like right before I got on, and this is like kind of minutia, but I kind of wonder, and I was listening to more. Did you listen to Maury right before we hopped on, or were you?
No, I was trying to set a bunch of stuff up, so I saw that. I
So
saw a couple tweets. I figured
yeah,
you would have it covered.
so here's something that's interesting. So the way the buyout market works is essentially the guys clear waivers and then they're free to sign with any team. Generally, it's for the minimum. And so most guys are looking for opportunity, right? So that they can
Right.
play and showcase themselves. Well, Sixers, and there's a couple other teams, I think Hollinger mentioned, like the Knicks still have some cap space. But the Sixers have that tax MLE that they've really only used a tiny bit on with Isaiah Joe. And so I wonder if there is a play for Muscala, who played under Doc, albeit for just a short amount of time, but has familiarity with Doc. Doc has familiarity with him, obviously familiarity with Philadelphia. Um, we could sign Muscala and not only sign him like from using a buyout, but even give him like some guaranteed money next year, because and that this will kind of like segue into why I think it was a successful deadline for the Sixers, because to carry contracts into next year, salary into like this summer, that's as much of a part of acquiring George Hill as his on court will be helpful this season, is having his $10 million for next summer and next year to, again, like if an opportunity presents itself, and I started to just say like, hey, I think like Brogdon is maybe a guy that they sniff around this summer, and it could be
Yeah.
like the Conley type thing where it's like 2 firsts, Maxey, George Hill, who started his career in Indy. He's from Indianapolis. Like maybe he goes and retires there. Like, I just think there's value. This guy that they got from the Knicks, Iggy, and I don't, the last name I can't pronounce, but he has an option for next year. So again, like if they need to add salary to a deal,
Hmm.
they can just pick up that option.
And throw it in a
So
deal.
yes. So I wonder if they purposely didn't want Muscala in this deal because then they would be bound by his contract, which
Right.
expires this year.
That's what I was
And
gonna say.
there's a little wink wink with Presti, like, yeah, we're gonna give you the 2 picks, but we're gonna want, because I think one of the picks is going, I think this year's is going to New York, that second rounder. But we want you to release Muscala, and behind the scenes, like his agent, like, hey, we're going to give him, some guaranteed money for next year.
Right.
And, I wonder. And the things that Daryl said today made me think like they're going to look at a big and they're going to look at a stretch. And he just makes so much sense. He just makes and even if he doesn't play a ton, just having, Daryl has stressed it. We heard it with Hinkie, like optionality,
Right.
having rotation versatility, and a team does this to you, it's like, okay, well, we can do this, we have a stretch now. So that's something I'm really going to be watching. I think April 9th is the cutoff where guys have to be bought out and signed with a new team by then, so it's going to happen quick.
Yeah, I guess I didn't actually grade it. I would agree with everything you said. So a B sounds about right. I don't have an issue with Muscala. It's not.
A lot of people don't like him. Like they have a bad taste from like his first run.
Yeah, that's ultimately what it is.
He was fine.
You have to look past that, because obviously that doesn't really matter at this point. So if you do take that out of the equation, which we're supposed to, then that's definitely the case. He does he can kind of play the 5. He's technically like a 4, I think, but he could definitely do a little bit of both. If you have like a game where Dwight Howard has real bad foul problems, because we know that there's probably going to be at least one of them.
Right.
And at this point, they're definitely shorthanded after that with both Poirier and Bradley now gone. So it would make a lot of sense. I definitely think that you could convince me about that wink wink deal with Presti. And I him and Moore have a pretty good relationship, so that would make sense. I want to talk about Kyle a little bit more, because I know we've talked about him before, and I was really on the bandwagon for him, like pretty hard. Like I think even more than a lot of people, just because I valued a lot of what he did. But the one thing I'm curious about is, what do you think was? I know there was that rumor deal about, what was it, 2 firsts, Maxey and Matisse. Obviously, neither of us have any way to know how real that is, but if you think that was what they asked for, do you think that's too much? Are you glad Moore doesn't pull the trigger there? Do you think that that is what they probably asked?
I think I think they asked for Thibault and and Maxey, and obviously Green, and the 2 extra picks. And I think there was a rumor, I don't know if you caught it, and Stein seemed like he was kind of full of crap all day, like full of shit. But I think he had it where he was like, Golden State is closing in on Danny Green, or there was something like a connection.
Yeah, I saw that.
And Golden State's interesting. I hadn't really placed them, but they have that Minnesota first that's really high. So, they're kind of in that weird place where, they're still, I think, in playoff contention. Maybe they're on the just outside. I don't think they're looking to like really tank their year.
No, I know they've been hovering around like 8 and 9, so I don't know where they currently sit, but they're right there.
So they could have given up a first, like, their own first this year, and made it like top 10 protect, something. So like if it was a really good pick, they kept it, but could have added Green. Then Oubre goes to Toronto as like the contract matching, and now Philly could have flipped that first to Toronto. And I just wonder if Toronto was like, well, no, we want Danny Green because we want to flip him for the extra first and end up with 3 first rounders. So I think it got to a point where it was just like there was one thing too many, whether it was like not having control over where we sent Danny, or one too. I think we would have done our pick this year for sure. And I wouldn't be shocked if he would have done one more, like 2023 maybe. But 2023 would have to be unprotected, because you owe 2025 to OKC unless you change their protection, which then, is Presti going to, hold your feet to the fire a little bit more. So, I do value Matisse in these playoffs. I think there's an element he brings that could change a series, in the sense that just having that additional wing defender off the bench, that's I think at an elite level, would make a real difference. But like if it would have ended up being, hey, just give us Maxi, Matisse, Danny, and we won't take any picks, I probably could have stomached that. You still have all your picks going forward. I could have lived with that. So I just think it ended up being like one thing too many. But I bet you it ended up being Maxi, Scott, Green, and one first. And I'm still kind of stunned that Toronto didn't take that.
You're stunned Toronto didn't take that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that to get a first round pick and Maxi, for and basically expirings for Kyle Lowry was like a very fair deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair, but based on the reports of how high their asking price is, I don't know.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I'm surprised. Like I just
Oh, okay.
when all was said and done, I was just shocked that they never ended up. I think Morey called their bluff, and they really weren't bluffing, and I just find that surprising.
Golden State is 22-22. They are a game and a half out of the 8th seed, so they are the 10
Yeah,
seed, which puts you in the play-in at least. So they're
right,
in technically.
right. So
Um,
I think there might have been something there, and who knows who leaked. I think there things get leaked strategically. That's something I've really kind of like figured out this season. I've always had that sense, but I think I've followed it a little bit more closely now. So I think there was, basically that was like the smoke signal to Toronto, like, hey, we can get you another first,
right.
but we're not going to put Matisse in the deal potentially.
Matisse is so interesting because I think 45 days ago, I was flipping a coin like whichever one of Matisse or Maxi they want, I really don't care. And obviously, he just like he's always been like a hell of a guy to watch. But the last like 45 days, he's become an absolute nightmare and a buzzsaw. It feels like he's been unlocked to a whole other level. And I've never been a Matisse's untouchable guy, but damn, was I close. Like I really, really had no interest in moving him, which is saying a lot because I've been probably more critical of him than a lot of people for most of the time he's been here. Obviously appreciate and see the defensive talent, but the offensive stuff has scared me. But he's literally even like I don't know if I even buy the recent hot shooting streak, but his defense has actually gotten so good that the offense doesn't matter that much, which I wasn't sure he could do at all, nor that quick. So that was interesting to me. Like, do you think? Like, what do you think if you're Daryl Morey? What piece were you like most least wanting to give up that like kind of made you not pull the trigger? Is it Maxi? Is it Danny Green because you want to win this year? Is it Matisse because of his future? Is it the first
Uh,
round picks?
it might have been the picks, man. It might have been the picks. That's one thing I think he seems to be guarding very tightly. I think again another reason why you saw 3 first rounders or 4 technically,
Right.
4 second I'm sorry second
Second
rounders go out.
rounders.
I think he was. I mean, if they would have put a first in, I think Orlando would have given them Fournier. So like one thing I want to
Right.
we'll talk I guess about some other deals. A lot of people were kind of pissed about Fournier today, and I get it. I get why, because he is good, and Boston kind of got him for nothing. But it's because of the situation Boston was in. So they were able to take Fournier in completely with their traded player exception from
Gordon Hayward.
Gordon Hayward, right? And didn't have to send anything back. So not only does that save like a ton of money, even prorated for Orlando this year, it also creates a $17 million TPE for Orlando in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So, if we would have sent a first, would they have taken like the poo poo of, Scott and
Ferguson.
Ferguson but now that gets complicated because you're literally sending like 5 guys for one,
Right.
and then they've got to cut some people, they've got to redirect guys. So I just don't think it was as simple. And if you make it a first, maybe they think it's worth the trouble. But the one thing Maury said right before we hopped on is, he's really big about two-way players, especially as it relates to the playoffs. And I think they valued George Hill's playoff experience. I mean, he has a ton of playoff games under his belt, as does Danny Green, as does Dwight, to an
Right.
extent.
And I've been saying that about both those guys for this whole season, and it's one of the things that I've really like. I've been willing to die on that hill, and I feel like a lot of people have like don't appreciate enough is having those guys that have been there. Like I know me and you talk a lot, and you've been on a lot. Like I've, no matter how Danny Green has played in the regular season, I haven't given a shit. Like I want him on this team in the playoffs. I value what he does. Like I really, really believe that there's going to be several games in the run that they go on where you're going to be like, thank God he's here.
I love him. Like, and it's funny. We get attached to certain guys, right? So I know there's a huge Mike Scott hive, and I get it. I understand why he
Right.
really went out of his way.
He's an awesome dude. He's a good guy. He's fun to root for. There's no issue with that.
Right. He made a connection, and so I get that. It's just hard because he was one of the most usable contracts that, could have done something. So it's interesting they hung on to him. But the guys that I sort of leaned into this year was, obviously Tobias. Take Joel and Ben out of the equation. They're like, I look at them as like our siblings almost, like they're our family. So like we have to love them, and like we do. But like sometimes they're just like they can frustrate you or whatever. But the guys that were really kind of like, I really enjoyed Bradley. Matisse, I just enjoy watching so much. Tobias obviously is like our guy. And then Green, I've just enjoyed Green so much. I just think I remember sitting last season watching games, especially towards the end, and just being so frustrated. We're like, we just need a bomber. We need a guy that just will shoot 10 threes a game and doesn't care. And, and then we get him and people are like, well, he misses 6 a night. And it's like, yeah, he makes 4 of them. He's a 40% 3-point shooter, guys. Like that's what it looks like. And that was it the Knicks. I forget what game it was. Like he almost like ripped his shoulder out. Like he plays so hard. He's played in every game this year for them. I just think he's been totally underrated. Not by me, but and unappreciated. And I think he does do some dumb stuff sometimes. There's no denying it. Like
I mean, everybody on this team unfortunately does dumb stuff sometimes. It's not like he's alone there either.
They do, and but I think he's big, and I think having George Hill now as like a stabilizing force of the second unit. And what's kind of nice now, although not experienced, all of their kind of bench rotation guys kind of bring something different. Like Shake brings something different than Furkan, brings something different than Matisse. So it's like I think you look at George Hill as being probably your staple like 6th man, and I'm sure Shake will kind of get first kind of dibs. And then you can kind of like if you're Doc, like you can kind of go offense defense, right? Like if you're like, hey, we need like I got to get some defensive juice in there, you can go with Matisse in the playoffs. If you're like, you know what, we got to stretch this floor. I need to just get shooters on the floor. You've got Furkan. So I just feel like now you've got some stuff where Hill and Shake will probably be the 2 main like wing guard types
for sure.
But having Matisse and Furkan, and it may turn out neither can play in the playoffs. They just aren't ready. They're just not capable. They're not. Furkan's not strong enough. Matisse isn't, can't do enough offensively. But I like the options that they bring, and I'm not as like apoplectic as like some fans are that like we didn't do enough. Like I think he did what needed to be done. I think he increased our chances, probably 1 to 2% of championship odds, and like that's a big deal to do that for 3 second-round picks, and that aren't really meaningful in any way. Like.
I got to tell you, Marty, because I don't know if you got to watch the roundtable we did last night, but you're literally reiterating what I said, because we were talking about the idea of if they didn't make any moves, and again, like me and you talk a lot, so like I believed from the beginning of the season this team was a contender, and I've stood by the fact that if they didn't make any moves, I would still believe they're a contender, but that doesn't mean that you don't make even the marginal moves. And literally, even if if you say right now before any of the deals, you thought they had a 20% chance to win the title. If you're telling me there's any move that makes that 21% and it's not, going to cost you and the value is fair, then why don't you do it? And that's exactly what I said about a guy like George Hill. It may only make it 21 or 22%, but that's actually a pretty significant deal. And I think that that's really important. They obviously didn't give up anything that, that compromises anything too big in the future. You've brought up a lot of great points about how, that they've actually created plenty of potential optimal situations, even as early as next summer. And I kind of want to harp back to that with you for a second, because I think so far this season, we know the Harden rumors and everything that came into that early on. There's been whispers about Levine and Beal all season. Obviously, they're not going anywhere now. And I definitely want to talk about what Chicago did. But before we do that, do you still get I get the feeling, especially after this deadline, that I think if Morey didn't believe that he was going to still have a chance to make some sort of very big splash in the next, I'll say, 2 years. And maybe that's even too far of a window, but I think if he didn't believe that he intended to and would have a good opportunity to make a much bigger splash than a guy like Kyle Lowry, then he would have just gone for it. So him not doing it makes me believe that he still very much thinks that, they may make a run at a guy like a Beal or a Levine or, whoever else may end up becoming available.
100%, 100%. And I think his activity level, going after Harden, being involved in this Lowry talks shows that he wants to make a trade to put this team over the top. There's no doubt in my mind that, I think he thinks his team is close. I think if you put a gun to his head or gave him truth serum, he would say we need a little bit of luck, probably some injury luck. I hate to I'm not trying to put the woogie on Brooklyn, but if one of those three guys isn't 100%, it definitely would change the equation, right? If Irving or Harden or Durant isn't 100% in a Eastern Conference Finals, that would change the equation. So I think he admitted as much tonight that he felt like they were the favorites, but I just think he didn't see the move on the chessboard right now. But he's kind of kicking that proverbial can down the road, but for a good reason. And right. I don't think his intention, he could have added Fournier for a first, and then this summer tinkered and added, done some other stuff. I think he's looking for, Levine might be tough now. It looks like Chicago is kind of going for it a little bit.
A little bit.
Beal is everyone's kind of white whale. I don't know if you can get there. I don't know if you can get there without Ben, but maybe I don't know. That's why Brogdon was the one that kind of hit me the other day, and I was like, man, that feels. The Pacers feel like they're in kind of a weird place that if you blew them away with an offer, and I when I say blow away, look what the Bucks gave up for Drew. I think Brogdon and Drew are kind of comparable in the sense neither is a perennial all-star, but they're both really, really good players.
Mm-hmm.
And Drew only had 1 year left on his deal. Brogdon has 2 and is actually a little bit younger. Now Brogdon's had some injury concerns, but
I don't want to
yeah, good point. Good point. So does it end up being if we let's say we get to the Eastern Conference Finals and we lose in 6, and it's just clear Hill helped, but we need a step up from George Hill.
Right.
George Hill's contract next year gets you more than halfway to what you need to match for Brogdon. So then now it becomes maybe it's not everything it's not a Harden trade, but is it 3 firsts? Maybe you don't do all the swaps, but it's 3 firsts and Maxey, and it's wow, that seems like a lot, but it's well, that's the piece though, and that's the literal piece that you need, and you have 2 years. He said tonight, I'm working in 2 and 4 year windows.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now you've given yourself this year a real chance, and then two more years after that before the contract stuff gets kind of iffy.
All right, I have so many things I want to take from that, so I'm going to try my best to get them all to you and try to work through them so I don't forget. Number one, that Drew Holiday deal by the Bucks. Do you think that just fucked the entire market to a degree?
I thought about that a little bit today, where it seems like most teams, if you look at the transactions, really value first round picks. That is still kind of the precedent that getting a first, even if it's pretty well protected, lottery protected,
mm-hmm.
is not that easy. For any even starter level guy. So I do think those deals, those desperate deals, the Bucks made, do kind of hurt the market, because I think it creates expectations that just aren't reasonable.
Yeah.
So
that one, the Paul George deal.
Right.
Like
Right.
it's really made it tough, and I think especially when you come back to the Lowry one, I feel like that's where they were kind of like that was their big chip was listen, like look at the other guys that he's kind of in the company of, even when you weren't getting them for long periods of time, like whether it was you had to re-sign them or they were able to walk away, like people were still
If
paying up.
if Lowry had one more year left on his deal, Darryl would have made that move today. I firmly believe.
I agree with that too.
I think if he would have been, again, like the Conley thing where you'd get him for this playoff run and then, one more full season,
Hmm.
I think he probably pulls that trigger and he's like,
For
okay,
sure.
like I don't know that I can get somebody better than Kyle Lowry between now and this summer. So I'm gonna, shoot my shot now with him. And we're not using everything. We're using our, the two, first rounders coming up, and another year or two we'll have access to some more first rounders after
Right.
the OKC pick goes. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think there's a reason he's protecting those first rounders. I really do. And I think it's to what you're saying. I don't. He's said that he's looking to kind of tinker, but I think he's looking for a big move.
Yeah.
I think that's the
And,
ultimate.
and his track record speaks for it. I mean, he has pulled the trigger and really gone for it before. So I don't think that, and it worked out. So there's no reason to believe he would be gun shy again. I mean, he really hasn't been burned too bad so far. It seems like he's a very good talent evaluator. It seems like he has a good grasp on the value of both, the idea of winning now and future assets and how to kind of calculate that and figure out what makes sense. At least, again, you can only really go off his record, but I think that's why most of us loved that he came here and have trusted him so far. So I don't, even if you're upset right now, which I think for the most part neither of us really are, but if anybody who's listening is, I think that you have to remove the current like state of emotion and the media swarming to what everyone else is doing and whether they've improved or not, and just really like go back to 2 or 3 days ago where you had all this faith in the guy and realize that you still should, and there's a reason you did, and because of that you should understand that there's a reason that what has now transpired is what did, and the only things that did. Something else we talked about last night that I feel like you would have a really keen sense on, and correct me if I'm wrong though, but what do you think about the kind of unknown about Ujiri going into all the decisions Toronto made, whether to move people or not? It seems like a lot of Toronto fans are like really unsure about whether he's going to stay or not, and it's made it kind of questionable as to what he really considers their direction, or how much he really is concerned with their direction, because for all they know, he may not even be, I think, what is next year his last year, or is this his last year?
I think his contract is up this year at
Yeah.
the end of the season. They have a guy named Bobby Webster, I think his name is. That's like their GM, and my understanding is he is heavily involved and like well in line to take over if Masai leaves. I'm not like that in tune with it. Like I think there's some talk like Masai might be given some like ownership, or maybe he even has a small amount right now. So I don't really know. I mean, I'm sure it plays some kind of factor. Um, I think Masai, like there's a little bit around him. He might be reading like his headlines a little too much, like and I think that I think he tried to like out bluff, other good GMs like Miami and Philly right now have great front offices,
Right.
obviously, like, and I think, there people were posting that like office uh gif, like with the, pointing the guns at each other or whatever. It's like I think it was kind of like that. It was like who's gonna blink first, and all those front offices were like, yeah, we're not blinking.
Hmm.
Like you're not messing with the Sacramento Kings of the league here. This
Yeah,
is
and
we're
we
real front offices. And
we got a little too used to that as Sixers fans. So
right, and like people were joking today, and they probably were right, unfortunately. And who knows, maybe it would have worked out. But like people are like, if Elton was still in charge, like we would have gotten Kyle, and maybe
yeah, but
we
at
would
what
have. But
cost?
right, but you have to show some restraint sometimes, and I do think Maury's managing. When Hinkie did an interview, like, was it with Lowe? I forget who he did it with. Like right at the beginning of the season, right when Maury got hired, and he was so excited about it. And he said, and I'm sure it didn't come out of the blue. I'm sure it was from a conversation he had with Maury, that it was like a 2-year kind of job that they weren't really um you know didn't have a chance to win it this year. Now it appears, maybe that was a little incorrect, but I think Morey came in seeing it as like, hey, I've got probably like 18 months to kind of move some things around. And the fact that the Horford thing worked out so beautifully, like to get Danny Green and to
Mm-hmm.
get Seth, like, it couldn't have worked out any better for them. So, I do think like Morey is looking at it with balancing this year, improving their championship odds, but leaving the door open for that big move down the road.
Yep, I completely agree. You mentioned Lowry going to Miami. I want to talk about Miami a little bit. Obviously, again, if anyone's not aware, Lowry did not go there. He will remain in Toronto. They did get Depot, and it sounds like they
Dude,
will be.
they made a lot of moves.
It sounds
They
like
got
it's rumored they'll be the leading candidate for a LaMarcus Aldridge buyout. What? So when I was talking about Kyle Lowry, and I thought that the odds-on favorite was that he goes to Miami. You said that it's better for the Sixers that he stayed in Toronto, and obviously for the season, like I understand why you'd say that, but I honestly felt like I didn't care if he went to Miami because obviously he's a good player and he would make them a little bit better, but I just don't really think the fit for him is really even there that much. And I figured if he was going to go anywhere else that wasn't here and not stay in Toronto, like I wanted him to go to Miami because I didn't want him to end up with either LA team or anybody we might see deeper down the line where like I've already given Miami a lot more respect than most people. I definitely think that they're the fourth most competitive team in the Eastern playoffs behind the big three. I think they are the other one that like you wouldn't necessarily want to see, but I still think it's a pretty big drop off from the other three based on this season. And like I don't think Lowry would have done that much there. So I would have been fine if he went there, especially if it was the understanding that he was going to like re-sign there, because I would love for him to then spend years 36 and 37 on a high cap number in Miami with Jimmy Butler and also probably have cost them, at least one of their young shooters, if not two, and some assets. So, I'm not saying you were putting them up as like, that they would have been the best in the East, but I actually really was kind of hoping that he went there, if not here. Obviously, staying in Toronto doesn't really matter either because they're not going to do anything. But
yeah, I can see that point of view. I think somebody else mentioned to me like they like the idea of like Miami using assets to get Lowry because then
yeah,
if a Beal or somebody like that
mm-hmm.
comes like into play, well now they're it always seems like Miami's out of assets, and then it's like nevertheless like they've
Right,
got like they really would have been like if they moved like a first and
and
Robinson
like
or
Duncan
Hero, like they'd
Robinson,
really
yeah,
be down to nothing. So I can see your point of view, and I actually agree with you completely. Like I think they are the fourth team behind the big three in the East, and I think there is a drop off. I do think that just the way that they have such an advantage from a coaching perspective. I do think that they will give somebody trouble. I think they'll win most likely their first round series,
mm-hmm.
and then whoever ends up playing them, which if we stay at one, could very well be us, which
Mm-hmm.
is like kind of fitting. I would be concerned going up against them just because guard play is so paramount in the playoffs. So having a bulldog like Lowry and Butler and even Goran, like I'm not saying I would have like said we'd lose, but
Exactly.
it wouldn't have worried me either too much. But
Okay.
I think overall,
So
like,
what do you think about Depot?
nah, it doesn't. I mean, unless he's like,
Dude,
reg-
I think he's I honestly right now like, and I loved his like kind of redemption story in Indiana. I feel like he's like come off a cliff, not even just like on the court, but like I'm not really sure where his head's at, and I kind
yeah,
of feel like he could be like a home wrecker there, dude.
he he could get rejuvenated there, but he doesn't worry me like Lowry does. He's not like a playoff tested guy. I mean,
Oh, for sure.
but it's just I just think it's amazing how many moves Miami made with like no assets. Like, again, like we said, like Miami never has assets. They get Ariza,
Hmm.
they get they're gonna get Aldridge on the buyout.
But
They got
what is
Bielitsa,
Ariza
right?
anymore
No,
like when I look at those things, like Ariza's that guy that, like, you look at the name and you remember some of the playoff series he's had and you think so, but it's been a while since he's actually really been a factor.
he was helpful last year for Portland, but again, it doesn't worry me. I just
Yeah,
the fact that they were able to make like
the
three plus a buyout, like
transactions.
3 additions, just was
Yeah.
like really fascinating to me.
No, yeah, I mean that's what they do. And like of all the places Oladipo could have gone to go and try and play alongside Jimmy Butler, like I don't see that. I don't think that's a good combination at all. Like as much as I wouldn't have been that worried about Kyle Lowry going there, at least I think that like he could have played a lot better alongside Jimmy Butler than
Yeah.
Oladipo can. Obviously they're different players, but everybody knows that. I gotta ask you, Marty, and I'm sure we'll have a little bit of fun with this. Danny Ainge, a whole lot of almost as usual. They didn't
Well,
get Aaron Gordon. They didn't get Oladipo. The one that is blowing my mind is you move Daniel Tice and get Mo Wagner.
that was for luxury tax. So they
Okay,
did that to get under the
I
luxury
didn't see
tax.
that at all. I have not seen
And
anybody say that. So
yeah,
it makes
so they
sense
did
you'd
that
be
to
on
get.
that.
Yeah, they did that to get under the luxury tax. The rumor is Olynyk, if he gets bought out, they'll bring back on a minimum, and they'll like just skate under the luxury tax by like,
Okay.
literally like $100,000.
Okay. If
I
they do
and
all
I
that, then I'll give Danny Ainge
so,
credit for that, I guess.
well, but I mean, they got a worse player. Like,
Yeah.
say what you will, like I think Tice is a nice player.
Oh, absolutely. Like that's
So
why I'm saying it. Like it does. Like I guess
so
it makes sense in everything you said. My thought is that if I'm Boston, I know it's been a down season, but the East isn't that strong. You have three stars and two very young talented stars. It just seems like that's not a win now move.
I
Obviously.
I'll toot my own horn a little bit. Like, so I called Fournier to the Celtics and I called Gordon to the Nuggets. I just kind of knew that.
Marty, at this point, you can toot your own horn all the time because you get a lot of this right, man. It's not luck anymore.
I had a feeling the price was going to be right for the Celtics with Fournier. Like, I don't even know that they're we're in love, like infatuated with Fournier. I just
Hmm.
think like they had this traded player exception. The pressure was on with them having kind of a disappointing season to like use it. I didn't think they wanted to use, like, I think it was like 28 million. It was a pretty big number, and I don't think they wanted to take
Are you
all
talking
that
about
on
the
because
trade exception?
yeah, they
Yeah,
had
it
like a
was like
20.
28.3 million, I
Right.
think. It was
But
crazy.
they couldn't even really use the whole thing because they had like the hard cap because they used the full MLE on Tristan Thompson. Like, again, cap minutia, but it just
I
seemed
love
like
when you talk dirty.
it just seemed like it was going to be like, Danny Ainge, like, right player, right price type of thing. So I just had a feeling that's what they would do. Everyone's like, oh, great acquisition, and they didn't give up much. He's going to be good for them. Like, he's going to play really well, but I
Sure.
don't think,
But he's also just
one
more
thing,
of the same of what they have, right? Like, does he
dude.
really?
Remember, keep this in mind. So our VP of player personnel, Prosper, comes from Orlando.
Okay.
So again, like if he felt strongly enough about Fournier changing this team's like championship odds, my expectation, and I'm sure Maury would want this, would for him to stand on the table and be like, go get this guy.
Hmm.
He'll like, he puts us over the top. And again, I think Philly could have gotten there if a first round pick was available, and they obviously didn't think he was, they didn't value him,
Hmm.
and maybe it's because he was going to be a free agent or what, but I don't think they wanted to pay him that whatever extension he gets. And Boston has to figure out, okay, so they have Kemba max, Tatum max, Brown just below the max. Then Fournier is going to be at 18 a year, probably a 4-year deal. I mean, we worry about our cap numbers, but like they're in no better shape,
Hmm.
honestly.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, at this point, we're still gonna have our cap struggles, obviously, with the big numbers that we have. But I don't think anybody, even just a year ago or definitely 2 years ago, you were like, oh my god, like the Celtics seemed like they were in such great position, and it didn't seem like they could do any wrong, and they were not only going to have the star power, but they were going to be able, they were going to be a prime spot for the biggest names. I mean, everyone was talking about Anthony Davis being able to go there in free agency, and now it's like, what are they doing? Like they just have all these, like they have all these
Well,
guys that you're not like I don't think any of them are able to be the number one guy on a team. It's like you've got, a couple guys that maybe are twos, maybe threes, and a lot of big numbers. Like it's a little messy.
Yeah. And it's kind of like a cautionary tale for like not consolidating your assets sometimes. And I think, they had all these great picks that, eventually if you just let them become picks,
Danny Ainge's war
they
chest.
yeah, they end up being worse than you thought they would be. So like you had a Kings pick that you thought would be top 10, it ended up like 14 or 15. So then the pick itself is lower than you thought it would be. And then the pick becomes a player, and if you don't get the player right, then it's like holy smokes, man, like that asset, a Kings like essentially unprotected pick 2 years from when like before it conveys, any team would have jumped at that, like in a reasonable deal. Now like Romeo Langford, like people are like, yeah, no thanks. Like no interest.
So I definitely want to get. So you mentioned calling Gordon to the Nuggets. So I mean, I don't know if I really have much of an opinion on that. But talk to me about why you thought that was going to be the case, and now it ended up that, and what you think about their logic behind that move, because it seems like they have a lot of guys that kind of play the same position, and now he just kind of log jams that up even more.
I don't think so. No, I think they see like Michael Porter Jr. Is okay at the four next to Jokic, but when you start having to go against like LeBron and like the size of the Lakers, or even like some of the size that the like the Clippers have, like you
Hmm.
need a bigger wing, like a guy that can really be like a 3-4, and I think Gordon gives them that. They
Okay.
were like they were really like
Do
down on
you
Harris.
buy him as being like a playoff capable three?
We'll see. We'll
Okay.
see. I mean,
That's
I
kind of
think
where
I
my point lies, is that I know that like he came in as like pretty much a power forward, and I know there's been this like somewhat evolution to him being more of like maybe a tweener, and obviously like the 3-point shooting has been a big reason for that, but I just don't really know if I buy, especially as he's gotten a little older, that means he's gonna be able to step down to that role. And when you're talking about your Kawhis and Paul Georges or your LeBrons or things like that, like I don't really look at Aaron Gordon as being much of a solution to that. I know that's not what you're saying, but
Yeah, I mean, I think he just brings more size to them. Like they were pretty out on Gary Harris, so I think like
mhm.
they'll move Barton to like more of a shooting guard spot, and then you'll see um like Porter Jr. shift down to like the three, and then Gordon play the four. So I think they've given themselves like some more size overall, like in their starting lineup, and I think that matters. I mean, I think it was a good bet for them. Like I thought they would have to use Barton, and like that was my prediction for the Sixers, because I thought Barton would be part of like a three-way to Orlando, and then Orlando would redirect Barton to us for like some assets. But
Okay.
I didn't think there was any way that Orlando would take Gary Harris back. So and I think Denver, if I'm not mistaken, only gave up one first. I think they gave up R.J. Hampton, who's like a young prospect, but they only gave up one first, if I'm not mistaken, and got off of Harris. So to me, like,
They gave up Gary
really,
Harris, R.J. Hampton, and a pick. So
yeah. So to me, like, even if you're like more lukewarm on him than I am, I'm not like 100% like a huge Aaron Gordon
sure.
guy, but I think he's a good, like, worth. He's got this year and next year on his deal. I think his number was like very similar to Harris's too. So you wipe off Harris off your books. You don't change, your salary cap structure really, and you give yourself like 2 runs at this with him. I think it was a really good bet and a pretty shrewd move by them to give that a shot.
Yeah, I'm definitely, I think more than the average person. I'm probably a little lower on him than most, but I definitely see what you're saying. Um, Not much to talk about here, but I just thought, every season we ultimately have to deal with the fact that they seem like they would be in everything. The Lakers do nothing.
Well, and it was interesting. Like they were, that at the very end that they were in on Lowry with the rumored deal was like Schroeder, KCP, and but they didn't want to give up Talon Horton Tucker, which seems odd. I mean, I've seen him play, and I know they're high on him. I know he's really young, but like I don't know. Like they're in it right now to win championships with LeBron. Like now, if they would have gotten Lowry, like, and only given up those things, like I would have been like, wow, like that's they're gonna be pretty tough.
And that's what I mean. That's why I was like, hey, you know what? If Miami gets Lowry, fine, because I'd much rather him there than
Yeah,
either
I
LA
agree with that.
team. And yeah, this is really the first time, and I don't know if it's, yeah, I don't know the answer to it. I don't know if maybe they don't believe in the team. If Maybe he's not really pulling the strings like he used to before, but this is really one of the first times it seems like any team that had LeBron wasn't willing to just kind of sell out to boost his run in that particular season. And I'm wondering if there's like a bigger picture thought to that.
It's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to watching tonight's game. Just to see. I'm curious how the Sixers respond. Like basically keeping the whole team together. I'm sure there were some nervous moments today. People thought they were going to be packing their bags and saying goodbye. So you would think they'd have some energy tonight. Like, oh wow, like they do believe in us. Like kind of kept our team together. That's what I'm hoping to see.
Yeah.
And not like a letdown because LeBron and AD aren't playing, but. Dude, the Lakers could really slip in the standings, and I know you're not supposed to care. It's just all about like LeBron and AD being healthy,
Right.
and home court might not mean as much this year. Blah blah blah. But I don't know. I think things are setting up as there's a real pathway for Denver, and I've always been more
Wow.
bullish on Denver than like most people. I think I picked them last year to make at least the conference finals, which they did. I may have even said the finals, but I
I
do
have
think
the audio. I could always find out.
I think I do think like Jokic and Embiid are like one. I think Embiid's had been the MVP up to his injury, and whatever if he gets penalized for missing games, it is what it is. But I do think they're like the two best players in the league this year, as far as impact.
Oh yeah, I
Excuse
don't
me.
disagree with that as far as the
And,
Jokic thing.
and I just again like I'm a little bit bullish on this Gordon experiment, and I think I after Murray's performance in the bubble, I mean I'm gonna give it like the benefit of the doubt that he's gonna like rise to the occasion again to that level in the playoffs. So I'm just the Clippers have a lot of talent. Their depth it kind of worries me. The
Hmm.
Lakers the Lakers, if they're healthy, I don't see why they won't be back in the Western Conference Finals. But if they slip too far, if they go down to like 5 or 6, and I could see something goofy happening with them.
Oh,
I
for
could.
sure.
So I think a pathway is opening up for Denver, and I think that's why they made the move they did today. Um, so yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like I'm same with Aaron. I wonder if that's like weird coincidence is that I feel like I'm also like always a little more down on the Nuggets than a lot of people are. Now they bring in a guy that I'm more down on than others. It's just like a weird combination of things that don't do it for me, and maybe there's a lot of bias there. But it definitely makes a lot of sense that the road would be open for them. This has nothing to do with the trade deadline, but real quick, I'm just curious because I started doing a like a weekly power rankings evaluation for steady picks. And so
Yeah.
what I do is I kind of break down both the ESPN and the NBA power rankings every Monday, and also the like the system that steady picks uses. And the team that I keep really coming back to that I honestly can't see much issue with, and seems like they're going to be built to be really a problem in the playoffs, even though I don't think they're getting any hype, is Phoenix. Do you buy Phoenix? Like
I,
they're up there right now. They're playing really well. They have Chris Paul as that veteran, but they have Booker as the scoring star. They're getting
I,
production from a bunch of different guys. Like I didn't really buy it when they started kind of skyrocketing up, but right now if I'm in the West, like I think Phoenix is is the top team I don't want to play.
I agree with you. I think Phoenix is legit, and when I say legit, like I think they can win at least a series, and that's my point. Like if it ends up being like a 4 or 5 series where LA has to play Phoenix, and Phoenix is the 4 seed, like that's not like a
Oh,
gimme
I would
series for the Lakers.
absolutely be putting money on Phoenix to win the series because one, the value will be there, and two, it's definitely possible.
Right, right. And especially by having an old vet like Paul, you feel like okay, there's a steady hand
Mm-hmm.
on that team. So even though they're young and maybe inexperienced, there is that steady hand. So
Yep.
I'm with you. I'm with you. What do you think? Just because we're talking more kind of macro,
Sure.
just let me give you a couple of teams because I'm curious of your take on them.
Okay.
Um, so Utah, what's your take on Utah?
As far as like how far they can go.
Yeah, like, do you think, they've kind of not swooned, but like had a little bit of a tough stretch, like after we kind of, did our thing against them.
Yeah.
Like, do you think, they're as good as their record has been? Do you
No.
think that, they're a little bit of like a, false hope? Like, what do you think?
I think that if I was saying today, like if I'm ranking the Western Conference teams as far as who I'd pick to win the whole thing, I'd probably have Utah third or fourth. I don't think I'd go lower than 4. Right now, I think my top 4, and it would be really tough to rank them, is actually like Phoenix, Denver, the Clippers, and Utah. I don't have the Lakers there because
Oh wow.
I really don't know if I buy anything other than LeBron and AD, and you factor in now, nagging injuries for both of them, and like you said, a potential free fall down the standings a little bit. And I think there's as much as we're talking about roads opening up for teams to get there, I think at the same time, kind of like you said, I think there's a pretty significant path opening up to LA being like, a surprise first, if not second round knockout.
Okay, what about Milwaukee?
Milwaukee is still the team I'm most scared of in the East, and it's not even like a knock on the Nets because I know they have the stars and everything. I just think that we match up against Brooklyn probably better than anybody. Like honestly, I think in the league, I think we probably match up with Brooklyn the best. One, because they have no answer for Joel Embiid, and I don't care what buyout people they get, they're not bringing in anybody that will do anything against him. And I think we've got enough very good defenders to do the best you possibly can against, a Harden, Durant, Irving combination. And that's assuming all three are available, playing at the level that you think that they can, and that the chemistry is there, which none of those things are remotely guaranteed. I mean, how much of it has anybody seen this season to really be making them out to be this juggernaut? It's not there. Like right now, they're an NBA 2K fantasy team still. So I don't know if I buy it. Milwaukee scares me because they have the depth plus the top end. Like Giannis could easily still train wreck a series against us if he really, really like is going. And even if he's not, they have the horses to keep up with us with Drew and with Middleton and even with Lopez, even though it seems like he's having a pretty down year. DiVincenzo's been really good for them. Connaughton's a nice player. So like they have depth and star power. So if anything, I think they're the team I don't want to play.
So it's funny. I've mentioned this to a couple of people, and I was surprised at their response. Like, I don't think it can be underestimated, like how helpful and important it would be for the Sixers to stay in that 1 seed, for Brooklyn and Milwaukee to play each other in the second round, which would be the most likely scenario,
Mm-hmm.
and to only have to play one of them
Yep.
theoretically in the Eastern Conference Finals. Like that is such a huge, like it's massive. Like I bet you if Morey were to run the numbers on that, and if as a 1 seed, the Sixers' chances to make the finals, I bet you are easily 2 times as high as a 1 seed. Like I think it's that high.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And not only the idea of not playing one of them, but like I said, when you look at, the fact that a lot of those guys have missed time, that, especially with Durant, he has the significant looming injury history that, who's to say that once you have them play through 2 potentially, tough playoff series, whether the first one's getting their legs under them, and then if they have to face a Milwaukee team who's definitely going to take them, 6 or 7, even if they end up beating them, then like there's a lot of chance you could end up, one of those guys having an issue, one of those guys needing, to like miss, like the later you get them and the more they go through, I think is only a benefit to you versus them.
I really think like if the Sixers make the finals, I think it's going to be as a 1 seed. So to me, I've heard just like again, a couple of people are like, oh, it's just they got to get there healthy. It's kind of like that Lakers thing, and I'm like, we haven't earned that. Number one, and number two, I don't agree with that. I think avoiding those 2 teams until the potentially the finals is like a massive.
And it's really crazy to think about because you really have to take into consideration this year that a lot of the season has been played with little to no fans, and the further we go, the more there's going to be. And we know over the past couple of years that the Sixers at home are an absolute monster, and with fans in the building come the playoffs, like it's a whole other thing. So you're telling me that like you're making pretty big claims to how much it's important, but it all translate because tell me, if we were sitting here doing this episode right now and it's the Eastern Conference Finals and it's, Game 7 coming up, us in Brooklyn, if I told you it's in Brooklyn, what's the percentage chance you give the Sixers to win? Like
Right.
25%. But if I tell you it's in Philly, I bet you it's at least 50. I bet you'd at least call it a coin toss, right? Like it's that big of a factor, I think, especially when you figure that at least, 5 to maybe 10,000 fans, if not all of them by that point, could actually be there. Like it is that big of a difference. It truly is, especially with
Yeah,
this team.
I think so too. We have two more games left against the Nets, if I'm not mistaken. I think maybe only one more against the Bucks. I have to double check, but seems like those games are going to be really big. Okay, I've just at least one more question for you.
Okay.
So let's just forget about where we end up being seated. Out of this group of teams, who would you most like to play and least like to play in the first round? So I'm
Okay.
going to give you a group of teams. You tell me you would most like to play and least like to play. So the Knicks, the Hawks, the Celtics, the Pacers, the Bulls, and the Raptors. Who would you most want to play, and who would you least like to play in the first round?
I don't want to play Toronto.
Okay.
I probably the I probably would say the Knicks. You could convince me Atlanta. That's pretty close to me. I'd probably say the Knicks, just because I don't think either of those teams can do anything. But I guess if I'm thinking like, what's the craziest outcome for either of them? It's like Trae Young shoots the goddamn lights out and torches us. But I don't believe that could happen. But the Knicks don't have that guy at all. So it's probably the Knicks. Yeah.
So after watching those last couple games against the Knicks, I don't want anything to do with the Knicks, and
Really?
not because I don't think the Sixers would win. I think they'd probably win in like 5, but I could see us like getting like hurt in that series. Like it
Wow.
didn't even look like basketball when we were playing them the last couple of times.
They
I mean,
are
I would say,
physical. They're definitely physical.
they did just trade for Vooch, but I don't think the Bulls have enough, and I love Levine. I think he'd probably go supernova in a playoff series, but I think, he would do his damage. I think, Joe would neutralize most of Vooch. And so I would say the Bulls, if they're right now, they're sitting in the 10th seed. So it's, not crazy that they could creep up to 8, but like that would be who I would want to play.
You would choose them.
Yeah, I would. That's who of that group I gave you: Knicks, Hawks, Celtics, Pacers, Bulls, Raptors. I would say the Bulls would be the most
Wow.
favorable.
I didn't
And
want to
then,
touch them either way because I just really haven't had the time to process what they are now, and obviously we haven't really seen it either. So I don't know if I feel comfortable, playing them or not playing them. And actually, we can kind of segue this because that's the last thing I had for you. I mean, if you have anything else, we can go. But the last thing was I really just wanted to hear your thoughts on the Bulls and what they did, because the whole season it sounded like it was mostly, okay, are they going to deal Levine or are they going to hold on to him? And now it's like not only did they not deal Levine, but like they made some pretty significant changes to the roster. And while I mean I'm not threatened by them at all, even before I really kind of figure out what they are. You're saying like you would choose them out of a lineup to play. So I'm guessing that might speak to your thoughts on the moves they did and, kind of what it means for the direction of this franchise, which has been in like this weird limbo for quite some time now.
I mean, my guess is they're going to make a real big push to sign Levine. I don't think they'll be able to do it this summer because he's making so little. Even if they were to give him a raise, like I imagine
Because you have to
he and his
work off
agent,
that number.
right? He and his agent view him as a max salary guy. So I don't think that they
He is
can.
a max salary guy, right?
Yeah,
Like I think
I
he is.
agree. I agree. I mean,
Okay.
if not, it's like 30 million a year. I mean, it's like, huge. So, but I think so. The dearth of like, true star, there's a lot of really good players, but what he's able to do at his age, like he'll definitely get max dollars.
Yeah.
So I think they're gonna race to the middle. They traded for Vooch. I think they'll probably they may have created some cap space. I'd have to like look, but I think they'll do some stuff, some maneuvers this summer to like firmly like entrench themselves as like a 5 or 6 seed next year. And like, so again, like if that's their goal, like if their goal is to be competitive, I think they're probably on their way to doing that. But
I
I
mean,
don't
they're
think
the 10 seed now, so they're technically in the play-in, but you would imagine these moves are definitely going to get them into the top 8, I would say, and probably cement them making. I think they'll make the playoffs. So there's if we hold on to the 1 seed, like you said, that being very important, there's a very realistic chance they are the first round matchup.
it's possible. I mean, the Raptors are the one team behind them right now. I think that we can probably all pretty much say like the Cavs, the Wizards, the Magic, and Pistons are not going to be
Right.
in competition. So there's one team behind them, the Raptors, who could definitely pass them. In front of them are like the Pacers, the Celtics, the Hawks, the Knicks. You would think the Knicks would maybe fall off, but they've got a decent cushion now, at least a couple games. So I don't know. I mean, they could move up a little bit. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen with the Celtics. Part of me like would kind of almost want to play the Celtics in a 1-8 and just put the nail in the coffin, but also kind of be careful what you ask for. So
Yeah, that's what I mean. I feel, I want to trash them. I'm not threatened by them, but as much as I would love to kind of like vindicate it, one, they're clearly a little bit of a mess, and two, it's like I got to give them a little bit of credit just for handling us year after year, and
Right.
I'm way too focused on winning the championship to deal with a petty first round matchup that then they're just gonna blow off anyway. Like, we're not gonna ever win that argument, even if we swept them. We're still not gonna hear the end of it. It might actually be worse if we do that.
Agreed. I would rather them not even make the playing game than beat them in the 1-8 series.
I don't need four more fucking J Pro burners coming at me. I'm so burnt out.
I would say the other team like that I would probably play, like I think could live with playing, even though they have the two big guys. But I think the Pacers would probably play us tough for 5 games, but I think we would handle the Pacers pretty easily.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like the Pacers, if we play the Pacers this year, it would remind me of the Sixers' first playoff run where they faced Miami in the first round, where it's not really that close, but the whole time you're in it, it's felt pretty close.
It feels close, and you're kind of nervous. You don't feel great, but
but then you look back and you win
games.
4-1 pretty handily.
It is interesting, when you are when you're a fan of a team and you're watching the playoffs, and you look back and you're like, okay, we beat Miami in 5 games. Oh, we lost in 5 to Boston. But then when you think about it, and I'm sure this is the case for most series, a lot of times, even those 5-game series are pretty close. Most of the games, and they do a lot of times come down to the wire. So, it's just interesting to look at because it looks convincing. Oh yeah, they beat them in 5 games. I was like, well, we only won by 4 points.
I would say other than last year's Celtics series, every playoff series they've had in the current era has been whether you look, whatever the record was, it's been a very competitive series. Even if they won 4-1 or lost 4-1, the only one I would say last year's Celtics series wasn't competitive as far as the Sixers are concerned. They got handled, and then I would say that first round Nets series, I never felt threatened at all. So that's the only one I think I can look back and say there was never a shiver of doubt in my mind, or a sliver of doubt that there's any way they lose that series. That's the only one. That Nets team was a fucking joke. They didn't belong in the building.
I agree.
All right. You have anything else? I think we covered a lot. I'm really happy with that. We're a little over an hour, so it's a pretty good time.
No, I think we're good, man. I'm excited to watch. Like I said, I'm excited to watch them tonight. I hope they have some energy.
Yeah, let's get on the Sixers after dark, baby.
Yeah, I mean, you used to be scared of the LA trip because they go out and party. I don't think you can really do that anymore right now, anyway. So hopefully they're pretty well rested.
I know this seems like this isn't the reason for it, obviously, but everything comes back to what we talked about early on in this. It's just I feel so much better about this team's roster construction, and not only because of how it is on the floor, but off the floor. And I never thought they had a bad locker room. And even when you talk about Jimmy, or even if you talk about Horford, I never thought, there were ever locker room issues. But when you hear so many of the quotes you hear from Dwight, I know a lot of people had mixed feelings about him, and he's had a very up and down career, obviously personality wise and playing wise. But, I really thought last year, he had a really good showing back in LA, both probably not even so much on the court, but definitely, seemed like a fine guy in the locker room. And dude, here he's been I was excited for him, and I think he's still exceeded my expectations on and off the court. He says all the right things. So many of his quotes, on a team where we know Joel, will talk, but he's still kind of growing into a leader. Ben is doing the same thing. Sometimes we get some quotes for him, but he doesn't talk a lot. Tobias is very well spoken, but he's very reserved still. But he's getting there. Dwight is always in front of the camera. He's always giving quotes, and like to kind of like be that guy, to be that vet that will talk and give the media what they want, and also kind of seem like he's like the voice of the locker room is like crazy to me. But like I respect it so much, and I love him, man. Like I love Danny for all the veteran stuff on the court, but I don't hear much from him obviously off the court. He says all the right things, seems fine, but like, dude, Dwight's presence I feel is literally just a projection of the entire team in the locker room, and I fucking love it, dude. It makes me feel so good about the whole season.
Yeah, it's been so nice, man. It really has been. It's been especially just after last year, you really wondered where things were gonna head and if there was any way out. And then to get Danny and Seth and just kind of like
and
click
Doc
those
and
guys.
Maury like
Yeah,
that too, man.
and I
It's
think
crazy.
I think it starts from Doc and Daryl too. But like it's just been fun, and it's, I hope I hope the run goes as long as it can, and ends in a championship. I mean, these guys like deserve it. I think like we don't recognize how hard of a season it's been for them. Some people are like, they're millionaires, like, so what? They have to get tested every day and stuff. Like, they're still human beings, man. Like,
Yeah.
you wouldn't like that if you were, it's to go to your hotel room every night, not be able to like eat with your teammates and like order room service every friggin' night.
Yeah.
It's I get it. They're making millions and that's awesome, but it still doesn't make it like easier necessarily.
No, not at all. And especially like, like they're very like, whether you want to, complain about the lifestyle or not, like to get to that point, you become very regimented. You become very, like, you're on a schedule, you have a routine, you have all these things. And, the last year and a half has thrown so much of that into chaos, whether it's in the bubble or out of the bubble, or just dealing with all the testing, dealing with making sure that you're available, dealing with, I'm sure they're like probably keeping a lot more tabs on like what guys are doing and where they are. Like, these are grown men that kind of have to report to people still, and that can be like a difficult thing to deal with sometimes with certain personalities. Like, again, it's just all those things that, we've seen a lot of teams have several issues with, COVID and all that stuff, and we've had our share, but I've never felt like any of them were actual like issues or really created any drama or anything. Like, it was just like, all right, yeah, like this is gonna happen to everybody, and some guys miss some games and then they're back and we're all good, and it's like, nobody's saying anything wrong, everyone's saying the right stuff, and everyone still seems positive, and when guys are out, they're still winning games. Like, it's just crazy, man. It's like a whole, I didn't know basketball could be this way.
Yeah, I'm with you, man.
It's been fun, man, and that's what I've been trying to say all year, man. It's like, I just like it's made me feel better about doing the podcast. It made me feel better about writing stuff. But like, even at like, it's just like the team is just like fun. It makes me happy, and I haven't had like I barely had any negativity this whole season so far, and I'm really trying to keep that mindset. And while we're obviously talking about title aspirations and all of that, like, I really like I want to win a fucking championship so bad, dude. But like, I also don't want to get so much tunnel vision that then like I look back at the season in such disdain if it doesn't. Like, I'm really enjoying this season, and I'm trying to just take it in as I go and have fun and love this team, man. And I think it's been easy for me to do. I'm usually not that guy, and if anybody listening like has still had any struggles with that, like, I really, really hope you can like open your mind and your heart and your soul and just fucking enjoy it and let it make you happy, man, because like, it can. It's awesome.
That's good advice, man. Yeah, go enjoy it.
Yep,
that's our advice.
Enjoy it, man. All right, Marty, I've enjoyed this, man, like a lot. Love having you on whenever. Really appreciate it. Make sure, if you're not following Marty on Twitter, make sure you do so at MW Teller. For Marty, I'm Dan. Thanks everybody for listening. Make sure to follow us on all the socials and everything, and especially for everyone who tuned in on Twitch tonight. Appreciate you. Give us a follow so that we can build that up a little bit. Thanks, and trust the podcast.
How's the job thing going? You